You poured concrete on my land and thought I wouldn't notice? That's what I said, standing at the edge of their brand new foundation slab, boots planted in soft earth that's been in my family for 3 generations. The guy in the hard hat looked up, half smirking, half confused, like I was interrupting something he had a divine right to do. But here's the thing, they built on the wrong damn land, and now every last one of them is about to find out exactly what that costs. I'm Caleb Morrison, civil engineer, widower, landowner, and the last guy you want to test when it comes to boundary lines. This story? It's about how a bunch of smug HOA board members thought they could steal my father's legacy and got washed out in return. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to stick around until the end. These HOA bastards, they're gonna wish they never laid a brick. Now let me take you back, because this mess didn't start with cement trucks and stolen soil. It started slow, it always does, with people like Evelyn Bradshaw. The first sign something was wrong came in the mail. An HOA newsletter. Strange, since I'm not part of the subdivision, but there it was. Maps, building schedules, and a cheery note from Evelyn announcing Phase 2 expansion, along with updated boundary clarifications. I nearly choked on my coffee. I inherited this land from my father, Roy Morrison, 6 months after he passed. He was old school, man of calloused hands and short words. He spent more time fixing fence posts than talking feelings, but I knew what this place meant to him. I still remember the day he brought me out here as a kid, sun just coming up, dew on the grass, and said, "Whatever you do with your life, keep this land breathing. Don't let 'em pave it over." And now here I was, staring at a slab of poured concrete laid 20 feet past where it had any right to be. I drove down to the Timber Ridge Subdivision office that same day. It's a smug little place. Glass doors, fake succulents, inspirational quotes framed on the walls. I walked in and asked for Evelyn. The assistant gave me a practiced smile that made my skin crawl. "Oh, you must be Mr. Morrison. Evelyn mentioned you might be confused about the boundary lines." Confused, huh? 10 minutes later, Evelyn Bradshaw walked out like she was arriving at a garden party. Perfect bob haircut, soft pink pantsuit, and a folder labeled Revised Zoning clutched in her hand like a prop in a courtroom drama. She looked me up and down, didn't offer a seat. "We've consulted with the county," she began, handing me a sheet that looked like it had been printed off a teenager's laptop. "Turns out the subdivision's southern line was drawn improperly in the 1980s. It's being corrected." I stared at the map. It was nonsense. Half the property line bisected my barn. My father had this land surveyed twice. Those lines haven't moved since Reagan was in office. She smiled politely. "Well, sometimes the past gets in the way of progress." I didn't say a word. I walked out, got in my truck, and drove the entire southern edge of the property. That's when I noticed it. Tiny red plastic flags planted like breadcrumbs, disappearing into the brush. Freshly placed. So they weren't just planning to take the land, they already had. Over the next few days, things started to escalate. Construction crews started showing up at sunrise, hammering and sawing and pretending I didn't exist. I left notes. No one answered. I called the county, but the records office was reviewing the matter. A week later, I got my own letter from Evelyn, inviting me to consider voluntary annexation into the HOA. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a mistake. This was a hostile land grab, dressed up in fake smiles and printed maps. I walked out to the old shed out back, my dad's workspace, dusted off his old blueprint cases. Inside were the original surveys, stamped, dated, notarized. I scanned every one. Then I pulled out my drone, launched it, and started documenting every inch of intrusion. They built over the line. They built into my life. They thought I'd roll over. They didn't know who they were dealing with. They built into my life. And I made sure the drone caught everything. Elevation shots, fence post markers, foundation lines bleeding past legal boundaries. I uploaded the footage, time-stamped it, and saved it on 3 drives. My dad used to say, "If you're gonna swing, make sure your grip's solid." This wasn't just a swing. This was the wind-up. The next morning, I woke to the sound of a horn. Not a car, a damn golf cart. Bright white, HOA branded, idling at the edge of my drive. Inside sat a skinny man in a sun visor and clipboard, like a mall cop with a vendetta. "Mr. Morrison," he called, not bothering to get out. "You've been issued a warning regarding visible gravel extending beyond permitted driveway dimensions." I laughed. "You drove half a mile down my private road to tell me my gravel is offensive?" He smiled like a dog, baring teeth. "The HOA has field of visibility concerns for adjacent properties." "What adjacent properties? I'm surrounded by trees." He didn't blink, just scribbled something, dropped a notice in my mailbox, and sped off like he'd won a war. And that was only the start. 2 days later, I found a citation pinned to my barn. "Unapproved structure color, please revert to community tone palette." Apparently my deep red barn violated visual harmony standards. Never mind that the barn's older than the subdivision by 50 years. Then came the livestock complaint. My goats, 4 of them, named after country singers, somehow got loose and wandered near the cul-de-sac. I rounded them up before they chewed more than a few hydrangeas, but sure enough, I got another notice. This one had a picture. Someone had followed them, taken photos, and mailed them to the board. "They're a nuisance," Evelyn later told me on the phone. "Perhaps you should consider boarding them elsewhere." "Like where? The subdivision gym?" I started noticing little changes. The flags marking their property lines, they started shifting, creeping deeper by inches. My mailbox got knocked down mysteriously, twice. Then someone installed a new lamppost a few feet from my oak tree. When I called to ask who ordered it, the HOA office told me it was for community lighting consistency. They were testing me, pushing to see how much I'd swallow before I snapped. So I smiled. If they wanted a game, I'd give them the scoreboard. That weekend, my niece Sadie came up from Charleston. She's 17, smart as hell, full of fire. I told her what was going on. She laughed so hard I thought she'd choke on her soda. "You're telling me the pastel mafia is trying to bully you off your own land?" "Pretty much." Her eyes lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. "We're going to make them regret that." She grabbed my laptop, fired up her blog software, and asked for drone footage. Within an hour, we had a site called My Land, Their Lies. She posted the footage, uploaded maps showing the original survey lines, and wrote a snarky intro that made me sound like a frontier legend. The post ended with, "They wanted a quiet neighbor. They picked the wrong Morrison." The blog started gaining traction overnight. Locals who'd fought with the HOA before chimed in with comments and screenshots of their own nightmare stories. Pet fines, garden gnome bans, even one guy who got penalized for excessive wind charms. But the real kicker came that Monday. I walked out to check the mail and found a fresh envelope with gold trim. Inside was a printed letter titled "Voluntary Harmonization Opportunity." A bribe, masked as a financial incentive to resolve boundary uncertainties amicably. $5,000, 0 cents. That's what they thought my father's land was worth. I didn't respond. Instead, I printed the letter, scanned it, and posted it on Sadie's blog with the caption, "Bribes now? Try harder." They thought I'd be embarrassed. What they didn't realize was every petty move they made was just fuel for me, and I had plenty of fire left. By the time Sadie posted that bribe letter online, the blog had already picked up momentum. Views tripled overnight. Turns out, people love watching arrogant board members get called out with receipts. One commenter from 2 states over wrote, "We had the same nightmare HOA. Wish we'd fought like this." But comments weren't going to win this fight. I needed facts. Certified, notarized, legally bulletproof facts. So I did what Evelyn and her pastel mafia weren't expecting. I brought in a professional. Not just any surveyor. I called Mallory Keene. Mallory had a reputation in the county for being sharp, fair, and absolutely immune to intimidation. The kind of woman who wore steel-toed boots with her khakis and talked to bureaucrats like she was handing out detention slips. I hadn't seen her since Dad's funeral, but when I explained what was happening, she didn't hesitate. "Meet me out there Monday morning," she said, "and bring all the old paperwork." She showed up with 2 assistants, a tripod laser, and a mug that said, "Don't ask me for a shortcut." I handed her Dad's records, original survey maps, and recent drone stills. She glanced over them, then nodded. "Let's see what these HOA saints are actually building on." The process took 2 full days. Mallory walked every inch of the southern boundary, marked the iron pins with neon tape, and cross-referenced GPS data. Her assistant recorded elevation, slope, and hydrology impact. It was surgical. By the end of day 2, she was quiet, focused in that dangerous way. "You're not going to like this," she finally said, squinting at the map in the fading light. "Try me. They've taken 1.7 acres, 5 lots built directly on your property. Foundations are over the line, not even close. Margin of error?" She raised a brow. "This isn't a margin, it's a heist." I stood there, staring at the orange spray paint circling concrete they had no right to touch. 5 houses, all already sold or nearly finished. "They knew," I muttered. "They knew when they poured that first slab." Mallory packed up her equipment. "You want me to file the affidavit?" "Please, and make it loud." By Friday morning, I had a full surveyor's report in hand, signed, sealed, and stamped. I scanned it, printed 3 copies, and drove straight to the county clerk's office. The clerk behind the desk barely blinked when I slid the envelope over. "Another Timber Ridge mess?" she asked dryly, glancing at the header. "You've seen this before?" She gave me a tight smile. "You're not the first." "Interesting." I filed for an official cease and desist against the Timber Ridge Development Association that same day. Legal description of the land, physical encroachment outlined, third-party survey enclosed. Once it hit their inbox, they had 72 hours to respond before things got real messy. "But Evelyn?" She didn't respond. Not a word. 3 days passed. Then I got a voicemail from someone new. A man named Kenneth Morrow, legal representative for Timber Ridge. Slick voice. Probably wore cologne to Zoom calls. "Mr. Morrison, we believe there may be a clerical discrepancy we can resolve amicably. We're happy to meet and discuss alternatives." I didn't delete the voicemail. I posted it right on Sadie's blog. The comments lit up. "They're panicking. This is gold. Document everything. Run them into the ground." I didn't have to. The facts were doing it for me. Later that week, I saw Evelyn at the farmer's market. She was buying organic radishes, like she hadn't orchestrated a land grab. When she saw me, her smile tightened like a wire. "Caleb," she said, tone sugar-coated, "I hope we're all finding common ground soon." Funny choice of words, considering you built on mine. She didn't answer, just walked off with her overpriced produce and a knot of board members trailing behind her like ducks in a parade. But the pressure was building. Marcus D'Angelo, my lawyer, called that evening. "You ready to take this public?" I thought we already had. Legally public, court motion, temporary injunction. Hit it. By the end of the week, the county had a formal notice. All development work on the 5 disputed lots was to halt immediately. No roofing, no landscaping, no further pouring. The next morning, construction trucks idled at the gate, confused. One of the builders, a big guy with sawdust in his beard, stepped out and knocked on my fence. "You're the reason we're getting shut down?" "No," I said, holding up a copy of the survey. "This is..." He looked at it, blinked, then muttered something about getting stiffed by rich HOA types. And almost felt bad. Almost. Evelyn and her crew hadn't just trespassed. They'd invested hundreds of thousands of dollars building 5 homes on land they didn't own. And now, every one of those homes was sitting like a stranded ship on the wrong side of a tide they never bothered to check. They thought I was just another holdout, some stubborn farmer who'd fold under pressure. What they didn't see coming was that I had the map, the law, and now the momentum. And this time, I wasn't swinging blind. The injunction hit harder than a falling hammer on fresh concrete. Overnight, 5 work sites froze in time. Nails mid-air, shingles half-stacked, and construction crews killing time with lukewarm coffee. It wasn't just a pause. It was checkmate in slow motion. But Evelyn wasn't the type to fold. No, she did what every entitled bully does when exposed. She doubled down. A letter arrived by courier embossed with the Timber Ridge seal, all pomp and legal fluff. The language danced like a ballet of veiled threats, delays, reevaluated survey discrepancies, and alleged misappropriations. They didn't deny they'd crossed the line. They just questioned whether the line ever mattered. Marcus D'Angelo skimmed the letter and tossed it aside like a gum wrapper. "They're stalling," he said, "trying to bluff while they scramble for a loophole." Let's give 'em something to trip over, I replied, already pulling out the folder my dad had marked in thick red pen, deeds and conditions. We combed through every record from the original sale. My dad had kept everything, zoning board rulings, easement clauses, even a handwritten letter from the county surveyor back in '82. That's when we found it. An environmental clause. Buried in paragraph 7 of a decades-old zoning agreement was a line Timber Ridge had clearly never read. Any development encroaching on this parcel shall be subject to full environmental review prior to commencement. Translation: they didn't just build illegally, they violated an environmental clause that triggered mandatory inspections and audits. I could almost hear Dad laughing from the shed. I'll file it first thing tomorrow, Marcus said, grinning. This isn't just civil court anymore, it's environmental, slows everything down by months. Evelyn tried to get ahead of the damage. The following day, she hosted a community growth forum at the Timber Ridge Clubhouse. The goal? Turn public opinion. Frame me as the obstacle to affordable living and harmonious expansion. I attended, front row. She stood at the podium in that same blush-colored pantsuit, eyes scanning the room like a queen blessing her court. We must remember, she said, her voice syrupy, that resistance to growth often stems from misunderstanding. I raised my hand. Yes, Mr. Morrison? Quick question, when were you planning to explain that 5 of your houses are sitting on land you don't own? The room got quiet. One board member shifted in his seat. Evelyn's smile twitched. As I've said, there may have been a discrepancy. There's no may have. I have certified documents and a county injunction. Want me to post those too? She didn't answer, just moved to the next topic like nothing happened. After the meeting, a couple of residents came up to me. One guy, nervous, mid-40s, khakis, too stiff, said, I didn't realize they never filed that review. That's kind of huge. It's more than huge, I said. It's illegal. Then came the unexpected break. A whistleblower. An anonymous email hit Sadie's blog inbox 2 nights later. Attached, scanned documents, HOA meeting minutes, and internal memos showing Evelyn had been advised by her own legal consultant to hold off on construction until the land dispute was resolved. She ignored it. I forwarded it straight to Marcus. That's reckless negligence, he said. If we press this, we can make it personal, not just HOA liability, Evelyn herself. And just like that, the Queen's crown started to slip. From that point, it wasn't just about holding my ground. It was about flipping the narrative. They wanted to play chess on my soil? Fine, but I had the board now, and I was done playing defense. The moment that whistleblower file hit Marcus's desk, Evelyn's illusion of control cracked. And cracks, they don't seal up easy, not when they're carved into trust. But if you think she went quietly, you don't know Evelyn Bradshaw. The next move came fast, loud, and dressed up in good PR. I woke up to a banner stretched across the Timber Ridge entrance. Community Solidarity Barbecue, all residents welcome. The irony? They stuck it right next to my property line, the same line they bulldozed months ago. Sadie looked up from her phone. Guess someone's trying to distract the neighborhood from that whole illegal construction on stolen land thing. They're not feeding burgers, I said. They're feeding a narrative. Evelyn's plan was clear. Paint me as the bitter loner, the cranky old landholder who just couldn't adapt. She wanted to rewrite the story before the courts could. But she wasn't counting on the fact that I'd already taken over the narration. Sadie prepped a new blog post titled, Welcome to the BBQ, brought to you by Trespassing. It included screenshots of the meeting minutes, photos of the 5 illegal foundations, and a direct quote from Evelyn's lawyer contradicting her public statements. It got 15,000 views in one night. The day of the event, I didn't hide. I stood right at the edge of my fence, sipping sweet tea and watching the show unfold like it was a cheap high school play. Folding tables, patriotic napkins, and the smell of hot dogs trying to cover something rotting beneath. Evelyn stood at the center, all fake charm and polished teeth. Every sentence out of her mouth sounded like a campaign speech. Growth, unity, shared vision. But the more she talked, the more people noticed the tension she was trying to gloss over. Then something happened she didn't expect. One of her own turned. Her name was Janelle Avery, mid-30s, mom of 2, lived in the house closest to the disputed property. During Evelyn's speech, Janelle raised her hand. "Evelyn, quick question. How come my home was built before the land rights were confirmed?" Silence. Just the flick of a plastic fork dropping into a paper plate. Evelyn laughed. "Oh, Janelle, we all know misunderstandings happen when legal language gets muddled. Signed off on my lot personally. I've seen the date stamp. The Morrison land wasn't part of the subdivision plan then." Evelyn blinked, recalibrating like a robot off script. That moment cracked the surface wider. A couple more neighbors started murmuring. One guy whispered something, his eyes shifting toward me. I gave him a nod, calm, no gloating. By sunset, the BBQ was less about hamburgers and more about whispered doubt. People left early. The music faded awkwardly. And Evelyn? She walked off mid-sentence, pretending to take a call. But the public push wasn't her last card. That week, I found my barn spray-painted with the word Reckoner. Red, bold, and dripping like a threat. Not from Evelyn directly, she wouldn't stoop that far, but someone in her circle was getting nervous enough to get stupid. I called the sheriff. He came out, took one look, and nodded. "Same paint we saw in the Benson mailbox last fall. Timber Ridge teens trying to act grown. I'll file the report." I didn't need revenge. I needed proof, and now I had both. Marcus filed a motion expanding our claim. Intentional harassment, defamation, property damage. The lawsuit wasn't just about stolen land anymore. It was about character mine, and theirs. The pressure was climbing, and Evelyn's grip was slipping. And deep down, she knew it. Because power built on paperwork and pretense can't hold when truth shows up with a flashlight and a blog post. After the vandalism, I figured Evelyn would retreat into damage control, issue a soft denial, send some fresh-faced intern to spin the narrative, but instead, she did something bolder and dumber. 2 days later, I heard heavy machinery rumbling before the sun even crested the pine line. At first, I thought it was runoff control work, but then came the crunch. Not the usual engine growl or the clatter of tools. No, this was trees snapping, roots tearing, and a sound I'd heard once before, a bulldozer blade grinding through forest floor like it owned the place. I didn't grab my phone. I grabbed my drone. By the time I reached the southern ridge, the clearing was already underway. 3 men in high-vis vests were leveling saplings with industrial efficiency. The dozer roared forward, blade low, chewing through brush that had marked the edge of my dad's old walking trail. I launched the drone and stepped forward. One of the crew spotted me and waved the operator to kill the engine. "You on the job?" I asked. The guy wiped sweat from his brow. "Got a work order from Timber Ridge Development, said this land was pre-cleared." "Pre-cleared by who? Because that land," I pointed, "is mine, and you're 200 feet inside my fence line." The guy blinked. "They said easement." "They say a lot of things. Want to see the court injunction?" That stopped them. 15 minutes later, the sheriff pulled up, same one who handled the graffiti. He took one look at the tire tracks, my drone footage, and the survey map. His face hardened. "I'm filing this one as intentional encroachment," he said. "And if your lawyer's half as sharp as he sounds, you'll have this case stacked high by next week." I nodded. They crossed a line. Again. I didn't yell. Didn't threaten. I just let the silence do what yelling never could. Later that night, I sent the footage to Marcus and Sadie. Marcus replied with a one-liner. "This just became criminal trespass, let's burn it down, on paper." Sadie took a different approach. She cut the footage into a 3-minute montage with dramatic music, overlaid the property lines, and ended the video with the phrase, "Easement or just entitlement?" It went viral within hours. And for the first time, Timber Ridge started to look small. Homeowners began showing up in my inbox, quietly. They weren't ready to speak publicly, but they'd seen enough. One guy, David from Lot 14, said Evelyn had pressured him to sign early on a property despite pending title reviews. Another neighbor admitted they'd been discouraged from asking questions about zoning during their purchase. Every story added weight, not noise. Weight. Then, without warning, Evelyn tried to play diplomat. An envelope arrived, no HOA logo, no board seal, just cream cardstock and her looping cursive. "Mr. Morrison, in light of recent misunderstandings, I propose a private discussion regarding mutual benefit and forward movement. We both value resolution. Please let me know a convenient time." Translation? She finally felt the heat. But I didn't respond. Instead, I walked to the back of the property, past the tree line they'd bulldozed, to the old reservoir my dad once used for irrigation. I hadn't touched it in years, but it was still there, dam intact, sluice gates rusted but functional. A plan began to form. They pushed. Now I was done pulling punches. The reservoir had been dry for a decade, hidden behind a wall of blackberry thorns and rusted chain link, but it was built solid, old school. My father poured its base himself back when people didn't cut corners, just calluses. I stood at the edge of the basin, watching the wind ripple across the cracked surface. The dam was still intact, so were the twin sluice gates. All it needed was purpose, and I had one. That night, I pulled out the old maintenance blueprints, most of them yellowed and rolled tight like forgotten scrolls. Sadie sat cross-legged in the barn, squinting through one with a flashlight. "You're actually thinking of restoring this?" "I'm not thinking," I said. "I'm executing." She raised an eyebrow. "How? Legally?" I slid a file across the table. "According to the county, this is a protected watershed restoration zone. Grandfathered rights. Agricultural reactivation requires notice, not permission." She grinned. "That's evil genius level." "No, it's just called reading the fine print." The next week, I filed an official notice with the Department of Environmental Quality, a low-profile form most people miss because it's buried under 3 sub-manus on their clunky website. I listed it as agricultural runoff rebalancing, citing erosion control and historic land usage. Technically true, entirely legal. Within days, the county sent out a field agent to assess. His name was Barry. He wore hiking boots and carried a clipboard that looked older than he was. "Looks like you're within bounds," he said, snapping pictures of the cracked basin. "You gonna divert upstream or wait for rainfall?" "Both," I replied, "but I'm starting with a slow restoration using overflow from the seasonal trench." He nodded like I'd just said I believed in gravity. "Make sure your release gates are marked. Beyond that, you're good." Evelyn didn't notice at first. She was too busy trying to spin the bulldozer stunt as unfortunate contractor miscommunication. Her latest HOA bulletin included phrases like "moving forward with compassion" and "shared land narrative." Cute. Meanwhile, I had contractors regrading the back slope of my property, on my dime, on my land, to ensure proper flow paths matched the original topography. I wasn't flooding anyone. I was just restoring what Evelyn and her pet board bulldozed through without a second thought. By the time the first rain hit, the water pooled exactly where it was supposed to, along the reclaimed boundary line following the natural incline right to the edge of the 5 illegally built homes. Sadie stood beside me under the shed awning, umbrella twirling, watching the reservoir slowly fill with the sky's quiet revenge. "You really are going to flood them, aren't you?" I smiled. "No, I'm just reminding the land what it's supposed to do." The news hadn't broken yet. Evelyn had no clue the slow swell creeping toward her subdivision was an act of restoration, not sabotage. But the cameras would. Marcus, ever the tactician, had hired a freelance videographer to capture time-lapse footage. "For evidence," he said, but the way the guy framed every shot, you'd think we were filming a documentary titled "When Karma Has Elevation." Evelyn finally took notice when the first homeowner emailed her a photo of standing water creeping into their landscaping. She tried to claim it was an act of retaliation, claimed I'd tampered with the natural ecosystem. The irony? By restoring it, I'd actually undone the HOA's illegal backfill and slope regrading, something the county had overlooked when they pushed the lots through approval. So naturally, I filed a follow-up report titled "Unauthorized Terrain Modification and Runoff Risk, Adjacent Structures." It went straight to the county, with photos, and drone footage, and a water flow model just for flair. They say revenge is best served cold. I say it's best served with a topographical map and 2 notarized permits. When Evelyn finally realized what I was doing, it wasn't during a board meeting. It was when the HOA's prized fountain stalled at the Subdivision roundabout with great ceremony and taxpayer fluff began sputtering brown water from redirected overflow. The water wasn't dirty, it was just real, untreated, unfiltered, unbottled nature returning to a place that had paved over its memory. Evelyn's HOA bulletin the next morning carried a different tone. We urge residents to remain calm amid recent weather disruptions. Please be advised that the association is working tirelessly to address runoff challenges while preserving community harmony. Harmony, she loved that word. But what came next proved she'd run out of poetic spin. An envelope arrived, gold-trimmed and hand-delivered by a stone-faced assistant. No HOA branding, no official letterhead. Just a check. $80,000, 0 cents, with a typed note. In the interest of mutual de-escalation, the Timber Ridge development is prepared to offer this as compensation for previous land confusion. We encourage a swift and private resolution. Private, of course. I held the check up in the sunlight, admiring its boldness. Sadie took a picture of me holding it like a fishing trophy. We didn't post it. Yet. Instead, I walked it over to Marcus. He smirked. They're not just panicking, they're bleeding cash. They built 5 houses on stolen dirt, I said. They should be bleeding more than that. We could turn this into a headline. No, I said, we turn it into a legacy. Marcus nodded and filed the check away as evidence. Evelyn didn't stop there. She staged one final Hail Mary, a press event, claimed Timber Ridge would be rolling out a new eco-partnership plan, inviting the local media to cover their restoration collaboration efforts. Which meant she was trying to co-opt my restoration to make it look like her initiative. Clever, just not clever enough. I showed up early, dressed in worn boots, rolled sleeves, clipboard in hand, not to protest but to teach. Before Evelyn could take the mic, I stepped up to the media van and handed the crew a flash drive. Inside, before and after drone footage. County permits filed under my name, audio of Barry the field agent confirming my authority, and a watermark on every image, Morrison Land Restoration Project. When the cameras rolled, Evelyn started with her usual sweetest cornbread delivery. We at Timber Ridge are proud to announce a new partnership with local landowners. Click. A journalist cut her off. Isn't this project part of Mr. Morrison's private restoration initiative? She hesitated. Well, we've certainly collaborated where appropriate. Didn't the HOA receive a cease and desist regarding this very land? Pause, blink, smile straining. I stayed in the back, arms crossed, watching the whole thing sink like a leaky canoe. By the next morning, 3 local outlets had run stories headlined, "Subdivision faces backlash after building on private land. Landowner restores nature. Ocho takes credit. Water rises and so does public outrage." Sadie didn't even have to post anything. The media did it for us. That same afternoon, I got a letter from Janelle Avery, the homeowner who'd challenged Evelyn at the BBQ. It was handwritten. "Thank you for standing up for what's right. I bought here thinking I'd found peace. You reminded me what real peace looks like. Let me know if I can help." That was the moment I knew the tide had shifted. Not just the water, the people. And Evelyn? She could feel it too. Because the next move wouldn't be made on a podium, or with a lawyer, or even with a bulldozer. It would be made with weight, the kind that settles on you when even your allies stop answering your calls. The first real storm of the season came in on a Thursday. Not dramatic, just steady, persistent, and heavy enough to remind Timber Ridge what the land used to do before someone carved cul-de-sacs into it. By now, the reservoir was half full. The overflow channel, rebuilt, legal, and lined with fresh stone, was already guiding runoff along its natural path. A path that led, gently but unmistakably, straight through the backyards of 5 very expensive homes. I stood at the edge of the slope, boots buried in soaked grass, and watched the water move like a returning memory. Not chaos, just consequence. That evening, I sent a letter. Not to Evelyn, to the HOA board directly. Typed, sealed, delivered by hand. To the Timber Ridge Development Board. As you are aware, the Morrison Reservoir is now operating within its restored parameters, under full legal compliance. Please ensure that residents adjacent to the southern easement are made aware of potential water rebalancing effects. Water seeks its own level. Caleb Morrison. Sadie read it aloud and cackled. You might as well have signed that regards gravity. Let them feel the slope, I said. That's all they've done to everyone else. Make them live at an angle. The next morning, HOA inboxes were flooded with emails, not water. Residents were asking why their basements were suddenly damp, why the walking path by Lot 18 looked more like a marsh, why landscaping lights shorted out overnight. Evelyn responded with the usual, temporary saturation due to weather anomalies. But some of the homeowners weren't buying it anymore. David from Lot 14, the one who'd messaged me weeks ago, forwarded me an HOA email. Evelyn had told them not to speak to media about ongoing internal property adjustments, so naturally he spoke to the media. A local reporter showed up at the edge of my property with a notepad, boots, and a GoPro. "I'm not here to make anyone look like a villain," she said, "but I want to understand what's happening." I didn't preach, I showed her. The reservoir, the permits, the original survey lines. I walked her past the spray-painted fence posts they'd ripped out, the spot where their bulldozer chewed through my trees, and the runoff channel that Evelyn tried to claim I engineered out of spite. By the time we got to the edge of the subdivision, she stopped. "There's water moving under their foundations." I nodded. "There's truth moving under them too. Took its time, but it got here." The next day, the article ran with a single headline. "Warned them, nature answered." Sadie printed it, framed it, and hung it above the barn door like a family crest. That night, thunder rolled in, not the metaphorical kind, real, unapologetic. Lightning sliced through the far end of the tree line, and for a moment everything flashed silver new. I stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the rain return to the land like it had a score to settle. And it didn't need me to fight anymore. It had gravity, grade, and a very expensive HOA mistake to correct. Evelyn, meanwhile, went quiet. No bulletins, no press statements, just silence, which, to be honest, was louder than anything she'd ever said. By Saturday morning, the ground had turned against them. Water wasn't raging, it wasn't dramatic, it was just there, settled in crawl spaces, soaking through ornamental mulch, creeping under the edges of pre-installed deck skirting like it had been invited. I took a slow walk to the southern boundary, boots sinking half an inch into soft, reshaped earth. The air smelled of cedar, moss, and that quiet panic rich people pretend not to feel. Across the property line, one homeowner, Gregory something, stood ankle-deep in his backyard, staring at a puddle that now passed for a pond. "You think this is permanent?" he asked, not looking at me. "It's natural," I said, "which is about as permanent as anything gets around here." He didn't argue, just turned and waded back toward his French doors, where his dog refused to come outside. 2 more homes showed visible signs, trim boards waterlogged, outdoor lighting shorted out, neatly laid brick edging floating loose like puzzle pieces with no box. And still, no word from Evelyn. Until Sadie called me from the driveway, her voice tight with disbelief. "She's here." I stepped out, and sure enough, there she was. Evelyn Bradshaw. Still dressed like a televised fundraiser, heels sinking half an inch into mud, flanked by 2 board members and a man holding a clipboard who looked very much like he wanted to be anywhere else. She walked up to the fence like it was still 1995, and I was some local handyman she planned to fire with grace. "Mr. Morrison," she said, all breathy diplomacy, "we'd like to request a formal sit-down." "For what?" I asked. "Your board stopped returning calls 2 weeks ago." Her smile never cracked. "We believe the situation has escalated beyond anyone's intentions. Perhaps there's a way forward." "There already was. It was called a survey. Remember that?" Her assistant cleared his throat. "We're willing to discuss compensation." I held up a hand. "Let me show you something." I turned and led them down to the base of the slope where the water pooled, clean and still, reflecting tree branches like silver veins. I pointed at the old stone runoff channel. "That was built in 1974, by my father, to keep this land breathing. Your board buried half of it with fast-tracked regrading." Evelyn glanced at the stagnant water, suddenly aware of its stillness. Her confidence shrank, just a bit. I gestured toward the 5 homes. "That's what happens when you treat land like paperwork." She said nothing. Sadie appeared next to me, phone in hand, video rolling. Evelyn noticed. "Is that recording?" Sadie didn't blink. "It's documenting." The man with the clipboard finally spoke. We'd like to resolve this before further damage occurs, perhaps if you'd consider a structured agreement for water flow management. I've already managed the water, I said. You should manage your leadership. With no script left to read from, Evelyn gave a brittle nod and walked back to her car, mud trailing behind her like a tale of regret. The next morning, Marcus forwarded me a notice from the county inspector's office. An investigation had been opened into Timber Ridge for unauthorized terrain modification, failure to report runoff changes, and neglecting water table surveys. Attached were images, my drone shots, my elevation maps, Sadie's blog screenshots. Then came the kicker. A new letter, this time from a homeowner group within Timber Ridge, separate from the board. They wanted to meet, not to argue, not to threaten, to apologize, to ask how to make things right. Funny how fast people remember integrity when their basements start floating. The homeowner group arrived 3 days later, not in suits or blazers, but in work boots and flannel jackets, with nervous eyes and folded hands. There were 7 of them, led by Janelle Avery, who didn't bother with pretense. "We're not the board," she said, standing just beyond the stone wall that separated their paved kingdom from my uneven pasture. "We're neighbors, and we're tired of being ashamed to say that." I stepped off the porch and met them halfway. They weren't here to defend Timber Ridge, they were here to leave it behind, at least the part of it Evelyn built. "We didn't know," said another man, arms crossed. "I mean, we saw the blog, sure, but it's different when the water hits your furnace." "You're not the enemy," I said, but silence gave Evelyn her leash. Janelle nodded. "That's why we're here now. We want to fix this. Help undo what she did." So we walked. I took them along the property's southern edge, showed them where the land naturally curved, where the water once flowed long before anyone poured a driveway. I pointed out the original stonework my father laid by hand, still intact after 5 decades, and the restored channel that now hummed with quiet precision. "It's not sabotage," I told them. "It's stewardship. This land always told the truth. You just couldn't hear it over lawnmowers and HOA emails." Back at the barn, we laid out a plan. I offered to lease the buffer zone between our properties, just a few acres, for a shared native garden space. No turf grass, no fences, just breathing room. They agreed unanimously. By week's end, the Timber Ridge Homeowners Preservation Collective was born, and just like that, Evelyn's title, HOA President, meant less than the mud stuck to her Range Rover tires. The dominoes started falling fast. First came the county citations, $12,000, 0 cents in fines for terrain modification, runoff negligence, and failure to disclose hydrological risk in closing documents. That last one hit hard. Next, Evelyn's resignation letter surfaced. Typed cold, not a single apology, just personal health reasons and irreconcilable misalignment with community direction. She didn't deliver it in person. She had it mailed. Marcus read it aloud and chuckled. She walked out with a whisper, no fire left. "Wasn't hers to light," I said. Then came the letter from the board's replacement, a short, handwritten note sealed in a manila envelope. "Be ready, Mr. Morrison. We acknowledge the past board's failure and overreach. We would like to formally invite you to consult with us going forward on land use matters affecting our shared boundary. Your expertise and history here matter more than bylaws ever did. Sincerely, Interim Chair, Homeowners Preservation Collective." Sadie read it twice. "They basically made you the HOA's boss." I raised an eyebrow. "Let's call it rent. Because here's the part I never planned, but sure as hell enjoyed. The HOA was now leasing a slice of my land. Monthly, at a premium. Not as a penalty, as a solution. They needed it for runoff protection, legal compliance, and frankly, to avoid future lawsuits. And me? I got to walk the ridge every morning, knowing the same folks who once tried to bulldoze my history were now paying to preserve it. And I did preserve it. The barn got a new coat of paint, same red. The reservoir sign was replaced. Morrison Watershed Est 1974, reclaimed 2023. Sometimes neighbors stop by and ask if the story really played out like it did online. I just point toward the waterline, still visible along the slope, and say, "You can't fake gravity." The land finally stopped whispering. That's how I knew it was over. Not because Evelyn made a scene, she didn't. Not because the HOA begged for mercy, they didn't dare. But because for the first time in months, I stood at the reservoir and didn't feel the weight of defense. Just peace. Sadie and I spent the morning planting saplings along the edge of the new garden buffer. Native species, nothing flashy, nothing ornamental. Oaks, dogwoods, some blueberry shrubs that would take years to fruit. But that's how legacies work. They grow slow, deep. She wiped her hands on her jeans, dirt caked under her nails. You know they're already talking about naming this area Morrison Hollow? I chuckled. Let them talk, as long as they keep their fences off it. The goats watched from the barnyard fence, unimpressed as usual. One of them, Dolly, wandered too far and ended up munching Janelle Avery's front planter again. Janelle just laughed from her porch and waved. Funny how fast things change when you stand your ground long enough for the storm to pass. Marcus visited that afternoon with one final folder. Inside, a signed lease extension for the buffer zone, payment receipts, and a notarized declaration from the Preservation Collective. They're making you part of the official advisory panel now, he said, tossing me the pen. You know, like a godfather of land ethics. Only if I get a throne made of surveyor stakes. He laughed. You earned it. I didn't sign it right away. I walked the line again, past the edge of the slope, through the clearing, down to the water's edge. The surface was calm, but the ground beneath still remembered. There's something different about a victory no one claps for. It's quieter, but heavier. Not the kind that ends in applause. The kind that ends with everything exactly where it's supposed to be. By sundown, Sadie and I were sitting on the porch, boots off, tea in hand. You ever think it'd end like this? She asked. Nope, I said, but I knew I wouldn't let it end any other way. We watched the goats, we watched the trees, and we watched the sun slide behind the same ridge my dad used to walk every evening with his hands behind his back, just listening to the land breathe. I took a photo, posted it on the blog with a single caption. Preservation isn't passive, it's personal. The comments rolled in fast, people from all over the country sharing stories, some with tears, some with rage, but all with the same theme. They tried to take what mattered, and I fought back too. So if you're still watching this, yeah, you, the one who's been nodding along because this sounds way too familiar, let me leave you with this. If you've ever been backed into a corner by some bloated board of authority, remember this. Rules mean nothing without respect. And respect is earned by standing your ground with facts, fire, and just enough patience to outlast the bullies. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, because I know I'm not the only one who's had to remind the HOA who the land really belongs to.